Thank you so much for that presentation. So much information that I've jotted down that I'd love to bring up. But before I do that, I want to bring our other panelist to introduce her, Patricia Silva, Commercial Officer for 4401. Fantastic to have you here as well. But just to give the audience an idea of what you guys do, you work on removing carbon by transforming it into rock. That's the very oversimplified version of it. But there's a lot more to that in terms of the context of what you do, how you do it, and the purpose behind it. Can you just give the audience an overview of the work you do and how it fits into the bigger picture?
Sure. Is this working? It's not working. I'll put it on. No, it's not. Thank you.
I'll just shout.
Yeah. Hello. Okay, it works. So, Quinton, thank you so much. As mentioned here, I'm going to actually give you the context of where 4401 works. So, I'm going to start with a fact, which I believe not many of you know, which is even if we stop emitting today any emissions, any greenhouse gases in the world, the Earth's temperatures will keep rising because of the cumulative carbon that we have already put in the atmosphere. So the IPCC, which is a group of climate experts, scientists, have confirmed that besides reducing emissions, it is imperative that we remove the carbon that we have put into the atmosphere and permanently store it in order to get to the Paris Agreement's targets of not going above 1.5 degrees Celsius. So for this carbon removal, the definition is mostly removing of greenhouse gases from the atmosphere and permanently store it. And this part of the permanent storage is where 4401 comes in. So 4401 is actually the molecular mass of CO2, in case you were wondering where the name comes from. And what we do is mineralize the CO2, the carbon that we get from these companies that remove it from the atmosphere. We do this in specific rocks. So basically what we do is receive the CO2 and we inject it underground in specific rocks which are called peridotite, which is called peridotite. This rock is very abundant in the mantle rock, which is very much underground and it's hard to access. However, in certain regions in the world, this rock is at the surface, so it's easy to reach. So what happens is, as we inject the CO2 into this rock, the CO2 reacts highly with some minerals that this rock has, which mainly is olivine. So what happens there is basically when the CO2 reacts to this rock, it turns into stone, into carbonates, which are known to be stable for millennia. And this process of mineralization in these rocks is a natural process. It happens in nature. As you can see here, this is peridotite, and these white lines that you see is CO2 that has been carbonated. But this happens in hundreds of years. What we do at 4401 is that we actually we speed up this process by 100,000 times. So we can mineralize the CO2 in less than a year. This is very important because we need to scale up, we need to be fast at getting solutions for climate. The IPCC reports mentioned that by 2030, we need to be removing from the atmosphere about 1 gigaton of CO2 per year. And by 2050, that goes between 10 gigatons to 20 gigatons. This is all what the reports say. And right now, we're doing at a minimal scale. These projects are going to grow over time, but right now we're in its infancy, and we need to get all hands on deck with all the solutions that we can find. And what we at 4401 are doing is one of the solutions that help scale up these solutions in a timely manner.
Okay, I shall shout. It's fine. I'm very loud as a person anyway. But the fact that the whole thing of like speeding everything up is so crucial, and not just doing it. You can do something fast, but you need to do it responsibly. You need to have the size behind it. You need to have the framework to it as well. Because as you know, going by the last discussion that we had just before we came up here, it was thinking about what the follow through is. of these projects and all these ideas. And perhaps for 4401, it's very much a case of how it ties into the wider picture rather than it being a silver bullet. This is in conjunction with many other ideas which Federico touched upon in his presentation as well.
Exactly, you're completely right, you're spot on. There's no one silver bullet for solutions for climate. Each of them are adapted to whatever the region or the location where they are. For example, we do this in certain regions in the world where we have access to this rock, but there are solutions that are better in different type of climates, in colder climates or whatever that might be. So yeah, we need all solutions that are out there available. So we need more capital, more investment, and see which ones can thrive, which ones can not only work, but grow and scale up in a timely manner.
And speaking of scaling and investment, what better person to chat to about that? Like some of the figures you threw up, Federico, was amazing. Like Q1 to Q3 2022 jumped up to $58.9 billion, and that's still growing, like a massive jump from last year. Like I imagine as well, like it seems the case that investors and the general ecosystem is getting really not invested both in a financial and literal sense about what technologies go in, because electric vehicles, for example, that's the big one. But I was thinking that's probably the most obvious one we can see, because in the city we see cars and transport all the time, whereas probably the more exciting areas are things like what Patricia is talking about, these projects that take what we already know and speeds up the process or makes it more efficient as a benefit to all.
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, there are a lot of solutions out there, and as Patricia pointed out, we need all of them. EV is getting a lot of attention, as did and still do solar, wind power, and the other clean tech success stories, let's say. I read somewhere, I have not sure of the exact percentage, but about 50% of the solutions still have to be invented, right? So on one side, we need a lot of capital to invent the new ones very quickly, and we can allocate resources to say we need to figure out these 1, 2, 3 things, but there are maybe 100 ways to do the same thing, and we got to try all of them very quickly. And at the other spectrum, there is the solutions that already work, such as electric vehicles, solar, wind, and many others, that needs more capital to become an alternative to the status quo, the energy system, and they have to be integrated in the complete system, which is a very hard challenge.
Even the graph you were showing, like there was one where it's like, blue economy,
right.
transport, energy,
yeah.
The fact that hydrogen and nuclear have like very similar funding as well. There's a lot of it's such a broad ecosystem which we can very easily forget about.
It is. It's very complicated, and that's maybe also the reason why we exist as a database and as an organization, is to try and make it a bit of order and make this information more accessible and comparable. It is a hard challenge because new things are coming up every second, and the level of complexity is surely very high. But yeah, I think it's important for investors, policymakers, corporations as well, to understand what's happening and invest in the right solutions as quickly as possible.
And Patricia, I was delighted when you mentioned that it's not a silver bullet. You're all thinking about the wider picture and how it ties into, again, that follow through of processes and the wider ecosystem. I imagine the 4401 is working with a lot of different organizations, partnerships, or even talks, or general collaboration as well, because again, referring to the last talk on ethical web, it's moving from trustlessness to being more trustful and understanding what people are doing with ecosystem. I'll finish the question now. So yes, building up that trust is very important, I would imagine.
Yes, definitely. And to be honest, what I've seen out there, because I also have an investor hat on, so I can see the technologies that have been developed in the climate space and are being developed. And what I see is that, for example, we complement a specific solution, right? We need a direct air capture company to capture that carbon from the atmosphere. So there we are complementing the whole process of carbon removal. But it's just not one company that's going to solve for it all. So we will be doing pilot and tests and basically scale up with several solutions. And each of them are completely different, as I mentioned, right? Some are less energy intensive. Others require, like humidity is good for them. Other solutions are better in warmer environments or colder environments. So, solutions complement each other. And for example, for us to deploy our technology, we use only renewable energy. So we use solar during the day, and at night we use biodiesel. But that biodiesel potentially at a scale-up stage, it's not feasible because we might not get access to as much as we need. So we have to complement with battery technologies that are being developed. Hopefully they'll use less earth materials and whatnot. It's going to be more sustainable as well. So all of that, some way or the other, we're connected to a lot of technologies, batteries, solar, direct air capture, and whatnot. And even at 4401, we also, in some way, we also support solutions in industries that are hard to decarbonize, such as cement and steel. So the boreholes that we drill and whatnot to receive the CO2 from the air are there, and we can scale up faster than those solutions can scale. So we're also going to be working with, partnering with companies, industries, hard to decarbonize, to store the CO2 as well. So yeah, a lot of partnerships, different partnerships in different type of industries as well.
Yeah, but it's brilliant to hear as well, because like different, even just thinking of countries themselves, like they all have different ecosystems, both in economic, social, weather, you name it, that you can't do a one size fits all. You need those people on the ground or those industries or those partners to really show you what to do, because there's a huge difference between knowing something and understanding it, and those partners give that understanding and that minute detail of how to tackle a problem that mightn't apply in a different country or a different territory. We, instead of making ourselves trying to know everything about everyone, it's more a case of recognizing what the blind spots are and identifying the partners or the industries or the people that can help you achieve those aims.
Exactly.
And Federico, again, the talk, I could take so much from it, but I guess the ultimate thing is that there's a lot of optimism behind it. Like climate investment, climate tech investment has gone up so much as well. Like Norway, for example, has just exploded. And I wonder if that's a similar thing, like in what I was saying to Patricia, that like different territories can have different priorities or different ways of accelerating themselves, because they might have the setup, they might have the right weather climate, weather or climate, they might have the right ecosystem in terms of social. And I imagine all these different elements come into it. As you said, it's very complex, very broad, and a part of the challenge is understanding that, not just for Portugal, but for the wider globe as well.
It is true, and also different countries need different solutions, have different policies. So, we might need different technologies in different ecosystems. So that has to be taken into consideration. We made before the example of Portugal having an opportunity with the blue economy. That's probably less true for Germany, for instance. So it's part of the work of the policymakers and local investors and organizations to understand what's most needed and create a solution accordingly. That's a bit the idea, and one of the challenges on top of everything else we just said.
Yeah, and sorry, Patricia.
Yeah, I like to touch a point that you mentioned, which is policy. When we're seeing from climate investments, the policies, the regulations are put into different states, nations, have also a huge influence on how fast these technologies deploy. They're mostly early stage. There are some, of course, that are more developed, but many of the solutions that we still need to create need a lot of backing, not just private investment from VCs and whatnot, but also investment from governments, from corporate, basically from policies that are put into place, from grants, from incentives, tax incentives and whatnot, from R&D that is putting out there, that is put out there. And some countries are more developed on that than others, and those are the ones where we see, where in general we see more development in those solutions.
Yeah, it's very much a case of trying to not streamline it, but make it more efficient in terms of, obviously these policies and checks are in place for very good reason, but they're probably policies that were put in place like 20, 30, 40 years ago, and probably because the world moves faster and faster, they're probably not fit for purpose, or they're probably a little bit out of date in terms of they were addressing, say, normal petrol diesel vehicles, but now electric vehicles are in place. So and scooters as well, as I've seen walking around Lisbon. Like there's a whole new world that's kind of evolved while the kind of policies or governments kind of realizing that. I feel that's kind of what you're touching upon.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I guess, Federico, you mentioned about like at the very start, like climate gets 19% of every dollar invested, and I imagine that's going to rise and rise. But how do we bridge that gap, like in terms of getting us to a point where there's enough investment to properly make a difference that we can see either on the streets or even in projects like 4401?
How do we bridge the gap? It's a big gap.
Yeah.
It's a big gap. Some report the numbers range from 40 trillions to 90 trillions, depending on what you include within climate technology and such. Of course, a big majority of this is at the infrastructure level, so not only the startup developing the new technology, but actually implementing and building the infrastructure. Our focus is more on the 4 steps, so the research and the very early stage technologies and companies. I think, I don't know of anyone quantifying exactly how much is needed. Sure. We might try to give a guess, not today. I will need to think and to research a bit.
Well, it's probably an unfair question to ask, because even in the first talk we talked about not trying to go for out-of-date metrics like finance and things like that. It's about like what the social impact is as well, which is much, much harder to quantify.
Which I think is actually very, very important. What we would like to do as a company and as a mission is also to help understand newer investors that maybe don't know very deeply the climate solutions and everything, to understand what is the impact of the solutions they are investing in. So we mentioned before the hard-to-abate industries such as cement and steel. That's how much, like the two together, 10, 15% of the emissions. We don't need to invest a lot of capital into bamboo straws. We need to invest into the big polluting industries, and that's where the early stage innovation is needed, but also the carbon capture and management and all this huge market is something super important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's hard to define how much. As I mentioned,
right.
There's huge intervals that different studies mention, but where we see opportunities is exactly on the industries that are, very polluting. So, for example, the airline industry, it's hard to reduce the volume of, let's say, flights that are going to exist over the world. You see like medium classes growing in India and like media regions that have a huge population. So I think that's definitely not going to slow down. It's the opposite. It's going to just grow. So what are the solutions? It's getting alternative solutions such as sustainable aviation fuels. They are being developed with different chemistries, and that will definitely help. In terms of, so having that mindset of, where can this be and give an economic value that can be perceived is where, most funding will come from the beginning. That other value of, like no one is, it's hard to quantify the costs that not doing anything, that continuing the business as usual will be, which costs will be. So we don't know that, so it's hard to get more people, more investment to come into the space because you cannot see it until it has happened, but that's too late already.
Yeah, because Andre was saying in the last chat, like profit, finance can be gravity in a way, and it's one of those things that you have to try, you want to try and fight against and not have that, but that can be the overwhelming thought from an investor. So it is definitely a case of like trying to broaden our horizons, trying to broaden the kind of, I guess, the education of it as well, because we've been talking about investment in climate for so much and climate change and so on that it's definitely going to be a case of those investment or those innovative solutions like 4401 that are going to catch the eye and the imagination of these stakeholders, of these investors, and the general public as well, I would imagine. Yeah, I'm great at giving statements as opposed to questions, but I realize we're going over time, a flaw of a moderator. We're going over time, but just to give the audience, if there's one, something to walk away with, if there's of many, many things, if there's one piece of advice or a fact or a piece of information you want the audience to walk away from this talk with, what would it be? It can be anything. Patricia, I'll start with yourself. Yeah.
So because I mostly focus in the carbon model space, and you hear news out there all over, what I can tell you, being in the space for years and years, is that what I realize is that, again, no silver bullet will solve for all the issues. So basically, don't think nature-based solutions are the best solution. Don't think technology-based solutions are the best. As I mentioned before, there's a portfolio of solutions that we need deployed to solve for the climate crisis. So also want you guys to be conscious that when you read articles, even from Greenpeace or PitchBook, which I've read some articles, are saying things that are not correct just because they're not well informed. The article looks so well written and developed in the research, but they're actually not. So have always a critical eye whenever you read articles out there that are, like mostly criticizing the solutions that are out there. And as you can see, solutions now might be expensive, but over time, like wind and solar, these climate tech solutions, as they're more deployed, more R&D is put into place, and there's the economies of scale, the costs are going to go down. So be hopeful, be critical from what you read, and come and move into the space and you'll learn more.
And Federico?
Yeah, Patricia at the very end stole my... No, I just wanted to say as well, like, we said how complex the problem is and how big the economic opportunity, because the numbers we mentioned, the trillions, are an economic opportunity, so jobs, and I personally think it's going to be not the only one to think so, but the biggest challenge and the biggest opportunity for our generation to solve. So if you're not already working in climate, I think that's the most impactful thing you can do as an individual. On top of that, well, we need good brains to understand the complexity in every form and from every direction. So I think the time is right to join and study and enter this market. I think there is no better time than now.
Fantastic. Well, listen, I'll leave it there. Federico, Patricia, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. And thank you, the audience, for attending as well. Please show your appreciation to Federico and Patricia, please.